Hello, and welcome to another tier list video. This time we're ranking the entire meta for post uh, Power Absorbed, or the ban list for Wild Resurgence has been announced. We've all seen it, and now we are going to rank all of, well, in my opinion, all the competitive decks that are available at the moment. Today I'm joined by Player 7.
Hello.
I haven't seen on this channel for a year, maybe. I don't know. But today we decided we're going to have a conversation, a deep, meaningful one about what the ban list means for the meta, what the new set's going to mean for the meta, and what you guys can expect going forward. So,
That's our type of deep, meaningful conversation.
yeah, it's the only,
Banless talk.
it's the only thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
So we're going to just hop right on into the conversation over the ban, not the ban list, but the overall meta, and we're just going to rank the decks that you should definitely look at, and the decks you should definitely be jumping on board with, and the decks you should completely ignore the hype on, throw in the trash, they're going nowhere, and we're just going to help you on your way to getting that success. Or don't listen to us, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we're jumping straight into it again with Supreme Kai. Black is a color that has not been performing well since the death of Gogeta, thwarting the Dark Empire. So, Supreme Kai is a deck though that might have received a boost, and Black might have received a huge boost in general with Red Gogeta and Shenron being outright banned. A deck that was very much keeping Black very much down for quite a while. But will this be the re-emergence of Black? What do you think?
Oh, I think this is probably like the heaviest aggro deck in the next format, but I don't think it's a bit too RNG with the deck. You can still low roll, get bad mills, get bad warps, and just do nothing turn 1 and 2, or you could go insane and deal like 6 damage on turn 1. But it's just too inconsistent, and its defensive options are, in my opinion, not the great. But
Yeah,
it's like it's a glass cannon black deck. Like we've seen it before.
yeah. I think Glass Cannon can kind of define Black as a whole for the last while, because it just doesn't really have that it doesn't really have the proper protection for that as well, and has been given very few good staples in probably the last maybe year or two since Realm of the Gods, to be honest.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It hasn't got love. Like the new support for the decks after that, I think are good. But I think Kai is like 1.5, maybe even Rogue. I still don't think it's that.
yeah,
It's not consistent enough.
I think what's also available in the meta, I think for me it goes Rogue, because I just think compared to what's in the meta, it really gets pushed to the side.
Yeah. One final thing about Kai. Kai loves to go really tall, really early, but the next meta is looking like it's also happy to go really tall, really early.
Hmm. So it's just gonna kind of be forgotten about and pushed aside
Yeah,
because it just doesn't do it as well as the rest.
yeah.
Next, we move on to Miku Kabora, which might be a bit of an odd one to bring in because it's been forgotten about since Realm of the Gods, or before Realm of the Gods. Um, but it did receive a bunch of new support in the next set coming out, Wild Resurgence. So where do you think this deck now stands compared? Do you think it's a return of Miku Kabora? Is the support good enough?
I think it's cool. I think it still has the same issue of that it used to have of being really matchup dependent. Because if you the ability to like steal a boss monster or steal a really impactful card, some decks just don't care about that, and some decks just don't care about the drop area interruption. But then some decks like Green Gohan next set really needs a drop area, so Meki probably has a favorable matchup against that. And you know the meta's going to slow down, so it's probably going to do better than it used to.
Well, funny enough, it disappeared because after Realm of the Gods, U7 Goku came out, and that was
Yeah.
everywhere. And it, pretty much everyone just said this deck is unplayable in the competitive scene. Then Gogeta came out. Everyone forgot about U7 Goku. Gogeta gets banned. Miku Kabora finally gets support. But you'd imagine with Gogeta being banned, it will be the return of U7 Goku.
True,
So
and I think that matchup is also just unplayable because
yeah, you can't.
U7 can't warp stuff.
Yeah, so it's like
Uh,
the worst possible time for Miku Kabora to get support because it's it's absolute white whale. It's arguably one of the best decks, or best red decks rather, in the competitive scene again.
yeah, we're really gonna have to wait and see. It's gonna be so matchup dependent. Like if U7 comes back, there's just no way Meki
Yeah,
can do that meta.
it's going to be incredibly interesting. So it's tough to rank it because it could be rogue, but I feel like it's casual.
I I don't. I think it has the power level to be higher than casual, but it's kind of like Supreme Kai, where it needs to high roll. Meki needs to high roll into a good matchup.
Yeah, the thing is, I feel like a good pilot can take Kai to top 16,
True, yeah.
even if they don't get the best matchups. If they just know the matchups better. But Miku Kabora, if you get a bad matchup, you lose.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
Which, yeah,
Oh,
I want to say it's a casual deck just by that standard, but I could be wrong. Well, I think we'll leave in casual for now, and then see later,
yeah.
maybe later on, we'll see how it compares to it. Now, here's the deck that I think might be the front runner for Black. Because of the sport I got announced is actually quite good, and the deck was never bad, but now that's got a Z-Leader and a few Z-Battle cards and stuff, I do think it could, for black players, then it may be their kind of champion deck, especially compared to Cumber. But yeah, what do you think of SSG Trunks anyway?
I think it's really good. I think it definitely got the best support out of the next set. Its issue was always kind of just like closing out games, but now it has a boss monster that does that, and yeah, it's looking really good. It's a fan favorite deck as well, so people are gonna play it.
Yeah, it was just a slower Gogeta beforehand, and then when Thwarting went, or
Yeah.
it's kind of just was meh for black. But now Trunks has an archetype specific boss monster that I think can make the deck, and I think it's just a fan favorite leader, so we will see him. I want to say maybe I'm being optimistic, but I think maybe he's between Rogue and 1.5, but I think he's closer to 1.5 than Rogue.
I would agree. I think he's the best black deck next set.
Or is he? Because
Yeah.
next to him is the current big dog of black, is Cumber. A deck that kind of disappointed me, to be honest, because I was quite excited when they announced Cumber, and the end result was kind of left a lot to be desired. What do you think?
Yeah, Cumber feels weird. It feels like a deck that's missing a quarter of its deck.
Hmm.
Like it's another one of those things where he's a mid-range to control black deck, and black doesn't like that. And with the meta slowing down, you'd think that would be beneficial to him. But then, if he goes slow and controlly with the other slow control decks, they're just gonna outgrind him.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is that a lot of decks that kind of are super aggro that can go in turn 2 or 3 kind of just overpower him, which is weird to think if you've seen the anime or if you've seen Cumber, overpowered isn't something that usually happens to him.
Yeah,
Um,
he's kind of a beast.
but I think he is still a deck that you can get to top with, but I think he is a step above Kai, I think, but I don't think he'll be as good as Trunks. And
Yeah, I think he's. Sorry, carry on.
I do think a lot of the player base will jump off him and jump onto either Trunks or a different color.
Yeah, I also think he's really hard to play at top level.
Yeah,
So,
I'm between 1.5 and Rogue because I think I want to say 1.5, but I don't know. I think it's a bit unfair to put him as Rogue, but I don't think he's gonna win
yeah.
events, so I'd have to put him as Rogue. Like
Yeah,
if
that's
it's
the thing. Like, I think he's a better deck than Kai, but he tops about as much as Kai. and I don't think that will change next format. So
If anything, it'll be less. I think a lot of people will move
yeah,
off. I think a lot of Kai players will move off the Trunks. So I do think
yeah,
Trunks probably should be a step above both these decks. But uh,
yeah, I agree.
I do see Trunks getting a few top fours and regular. I don't know if he'll win that many events, but I do see kind of around that top four, top eight. While I don't think Cumber will be spending a lot of time around the top four, top eight.
I agree. Should we go Rogue?
Yeah, I think Rogue is where I'm putting
Yeah.
Cumber. Next is one of my favorite decks of all time. Maybe it's not worth putting in the conversation, but Agents of Destruction, the black one, not the yellow bobbity one. The old Agents of Destruction from the anniversary box all those years ago. Um, this is a fantastic deck for fun, but competitive wise, it just doesn't really have the options to be able to take out the top decks and can kind of get worked over by your Majin Vegetas. Anything that has barrier removal kind of hurts this deck, and the more power creep comes into it, the more AOD kind of starts falling away. Uh, so,
Yeah.
so it's hard to put
So,
an argument in for it to be above Rogue, but is it below Rogue at this point?
oh, I don't know. Looking at Meki and Casual, I'm like, I feel like that's because AOD is not as good as Kai in terms of an aggro deck.
Hmm.
And AOD does kind of feel a bit power creep now. It still has crazy good cards, but it does feel a bit power creep now.
Yeah,
Oh, I guess casual. Like, it definitely has a really good pilot can top with this, but you'll never see this win an event.
it's true. I don't even think it's really won that many events since launch. To be honest, I mean, the deck did come out, and it didn't really impact the meta straight away. Um, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, part of me wants to say casual, but I do see people like it can be a tough deck, but it has the same issues as Miku Kabora, where it's matchup dependent. I think like entry 21 as well would punish the deck, and it doesn't really generate a lot of Z energy either, which is probably why I'd have to say it's casual at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it will do well into green next set either.
Yeah, but that's the nature of the card game. It's sad,
Yep.
but maybe we'll get a reboot leader with a Z-Leader or something like that to improve the deck. Now we're moving on to a deck that you're more excited about than anybody ever is the new Blue Baby. I think from initially reading the cards that this guy is a very serious contender for meta, but I do think it will require a good pilot to. It's not a deck that plays itself like a Gogeta or Shinra. I think you have to know your matchups, you have to know your sequencing, and you have to know how to build this deck because there's a lot of cards. Especially you can include some of the cards from BT10. I believe is when was it BT10 or 11 when the original
Yeah.
Blue Baby came out. A lot of those cards are still compatible with this leader. There will be a lot of people using the Unison or deciding whether or not to use the Unison, the parasitic balls and stuff like that. There's a lot of options that way you can go with this deck. Um, but yeah, I do think initially when this deck comes out, it might not see uh, results straight away, but I think as the meta goes on, I think it will work its way in and
Yeah.
eventually get to. It will win events, no doubt, but I think it will take its time to
I
find its place in the meta.
I agree. Do you remember when Gamma got revealed and everyone was like, "Yeah, this deck looks like fine," and then it took everyone a while, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, this deck's actually messed up."
Yeah,
I I think it's a similar case with Baby. The more I've tested it, the more I was like, "Oh, this deck has crazy interactions that a blue deck just shouldn't have. It
hmm,
can do so many things."
hmm, it's true.
And
It's go on.
yeah, so it draws my like in testing, my turn two hand is 15 cards. It's insane how much this deck draws.
So what you're
And
saying
it, you
is,
just
this terrible matchup against Cooler Mill.
yeah.
It's gonna put it in the trash can.
Yeah, it's also like you can build it in like two different ways. You can go control with some of the older stuff, or you can go really aggro.
Yeah.
So it's gonna catch a lot of people off guard. I honestly think this is like potentially a tier one. I don't think it's gonna be popular because I
Hmm.
think it's hard to play, but I think it's a tier one blue deck.
Yeah, the only thing that I think goes against it, or I guess two things, Cooler Mill, apparently, and the other thing is that Android 21, the newest one, um, that really does um like when your opponent plays blue. It's kind of the check for blue meta decks, and it's a very popular deck, especially in North America. So that's one thing that kind of goes against it, and going into this meta is that there's another competitive deck that you know punishes blue players in Android 21. Um,
Yeah, that's just matchup check. Like if you get that and you don't win by turn three, you're gonna lose the game.
yeah,
Like
you get ground out of it. So yeah,
yeah,
there's a lot to consider. For me, it's tough to because I want to say tier one, but I also think it's between 1.5 and tier one because I do kind of feel that it has some weaknesses, but I also think those weaknesses might kind of slowly die out of the game. Or, but yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say because it might never take off, but it might be the best deck.
yeah. It's a hard one to quantify. I would put it in like the top of 1.5 now. I
Yeah.
think it's the most slept on deck out of the next set. Like so many people say this deck's rubbish, and they're like, "What are you looking at?" You know?
Uh, definitely not. Like I think that's a bad take. That's
Yeah,
to say this deck won't be competing at the highest level,
yeah,
or at least you're probably missing something because I think even the fact that you can use Golden Avenger is native to the deck, and you've got an option
you
either to use.
search, you search baby's minion. How
Yeah,
is this a bad deck? Like,
yeah, I think a lot of people forget about how powerful the original Planet Tuffle deck was, and the fact that the
yeah,
Planet Tuffle baby, I think it got top six in an event like literally in the last month or 2 months ago.
yeah,
So
that deck
people
still tops.
people are still finding a way to make an old deck version of baby like. So that's why I think this actually probably does belong up here, but I'm too much of a coward because it might not take off at all. Um, Moving on to its biggest rival, or its Blue Baby's what will be its white whale, will be the Android 21 deck from BT20. I believe it's Power Absorb, or yeah, it's Power Absorb
Yeah, yeah, that
BT20.
was
Yeah.
powerful.
Android 21. I don't think it's a great deck, but it's a very popular deck.
Yeah,
And it wins. It's getting in the top 16s, top 8s regularly, so the results don't lie. It's definitely doing well, but I wonder if that's more to its popularity, or if it's just or if it really is just that good.
yeah. Look, if you get lucky and you play against blue and green all day, you're gonna swear this is the best deck ever made. But if you play against black, yellow, or red, you're gonna have a much harder time. That's just the nature of this deck, you know?
Yeah, that's why I want to say it's a rogue. But the results, like I'd put it in rogue, but the results of constantly
Yeah.
seeing it in the competitive scene, unfortunately, I
Like,
can't argue about it not being 1.5, but I feel like it's a rogue deck. But the results
yeah.
say it's
Like,
1.5.
yeah. Like if you just know the matchup and you're playing like a favored deck, you'd swear this is a rogue deck. But the meta would tell you that this is a tier one deck.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
I don't want the player base coming at me with serious heat, so I'm gonna put in 1.5 because
Okay.
they might they're gonna swear by it that belongs up here, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna split the difference and put in 1.5.
Yeah.
Next is a deck that, well, I don't know. I think you were kind of underwhelmed by. You were excited about what the announcement of the Ultimate deck, and then seeing the spoilers. I think you were feeling a little disappointed, and I think a lot of people were. Is Goku Black Ultimate
Yeah.
deck?
You know what the issue with this deck is? Every card in it, you read it and you're like, yeah, that's alright. Like, you don't read any card in particular and go, wow, that's what I want to play this deck. You just read it and go, yeah, that's alright. Yeah, that'll do.
Yeah,
And the whole deck just feels fine.
yeah. There's nothing that made me think like, oh, this deck is coming for the meta. This, especially with all the options you now have in blue.
Yeah.
I just think this is actually just going to be forgotten about.
I will say it got a huge buff of Sin and Gogeta being banned and the Zeno getting errated. Now the boss monster is a lot easier to stick on field.
Yeah.
I think this deck is good and it could top, but the issue is why would you play this deck over the other blue deck?
Yeah,
It doesn't offer anything better than the others.
It would be a fan superficial choice just because you want to play Zamasu. Yeah, I think this is going to go into the casual, just not only because I don't think it's hugely scary, but I just think the options in blue that you got at the moment just really downgrade this massively. Like it would be unfair to put this on the same level as your Android 21 expert decks and your blue babies and so on.
Yeah, and especially our next deck, which you can.
Yeah, it's the deck that won't die. It's the deck that's been around since the very first Unison leader. Soul Striker. I don't know why this is still in the meta, to be honest. I don't know why we continue to see it top.
I swear, this is like die-hard Soul Striker fans who swear by the fact that this is the best leader ever made, and they just won't let the deck die.
Yeah,
but
it's still top and it's still relevant.
I know.
I never really got it because I've never really struggled against the deck, but people are pulling out results against it, or with it.
Yeah.
So
look, that is just what Soul Striker is. It is the deck that will never go away.
Yeah, I think it's the dictionary definition of rogue. It's just it is rogue. It's the definition of rogue. If someone is new to the game and they ask, explain rogue to me, I'll say Soul Striker.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not much to say on Soul Striker because everybody has seen it, everybody knows about it. It's been around since the dawn of time, apparently.
I know.
The dawn of Unisons, anyway. Yeah. So, moving on to a much newer deck, the start of Z decks, this leader ushered in these structure decks. SS2 Trunks reboot. A deck that's actually kind of strong, but you wouldn't think it.
Yeah, good blue stuff deck.
Yeah, and it's got a very good mechanic against Schlonku. Is it Schlonku? Yeah. It's actually
can't be critted. That's pretty good.
So that kind of immediately makes it better than Goku Black, and it's a tough matchup. Like I've played against it, you have to be smart about how you do your turns, and suddenly all your crit cards are trash.
Yeah, I really think this deck is good. Like, a really good pilot can easily top with this deck.
Yeah, like, I think it's between Rogue and 1.5, but I'm going to put it in the Rogue, just because I think it's a little weaker. And it's tough, maybe there should have been a category between Soul Striker and Blue Baby, but it's not that, I don't see it that often, so I'm going to put it in Rogue for now.
Yeah. I think it's just one of those cases where the deck is really strong, but it's not. You wouldn't go into a tournament knowing you're going to play against this.
Yeah, that's why I'm going to put in Rogue, but like, you know, if you're a good pilot, you can make this deck as good as you want. It's sky's the limit, really.
Yeah.
Next, we're moving backwards into SS4 Vegeta. It's a deck that I think should be stronger than Soul Striker because it's very good at ramping, but it's not that popular, and we haven't seen it in a long time. It's just kind of got forgotten about, but I still think it's incredibly strong. Ramping's really strong, and Blue has some really, really powerful cards once you get up to the 4, 5, 6, 7 energy range. So, why do you think this deck doesn't get talked about, and should it be ever talked about? Is it irrelevant now? SS4
I
Vegeta.
think
Oh,
I think a lot of people moved it to the side because of Blue Beerus, but arguably I think this deck is now in a better place than Blue Beerus. Because this deck really struggled with getting aggro down early on. It hated those matchups, and it hated not being able to get its damage in early. But now that the meta's slowing down, it can do that. Yeah, Boonison going to 1 hurt this deck, but it still has Rise of the Super Warrior, which is one of the most busted cards ever made.
it also has the Zeno Unison anyway, if you wanted to help your ramping strategy.
Yeah, actually, and the Zeno Unison is a great out to a lot of decks in the next set that use field cards.
Yeah, so it's like it could see resurgence. I think at the moment it's probably casual, just because I can't see
Yeah.
people picking it up. But it's literally right behind his son,
Yeah.
because he's a great father. Next is one of your favorite decks to play against. You've had some special
Oh.
memories against Expert Deck 21. Would you like to elaborate on how amazing this deck is?
Oh, I hate this deck. I This deck lets you know you've lost by turn 2, but then takes the game to turn 7. I really dislike the fact that this is a blue hand control deck, and the big Achilles heel of hand control is that it's always meant to be really fragile. You can kill it really easily, but this is a blue hand control deck that you can't kill, and it draws a load of cards.
Yeah.
So I think this deck is really toxic, and hopefully isn't around for much longer.
Well,
But I do think it's a meta deck.
yeah, I can't disagree. It's so strong, and that promo card they released that promo card specifically to make this deck meta.
Yeah, I don't think they had the intention of making it a hand control deck, but that's
Oh.
what happened. It's now meta.
They know what they were doing, especially when you get rid of
Okay.
Gogeta and Sen, the two best decks for drawn and drawn and drawn and drawn. Now they're gone.
True,
This
true,
like
yeah.
that was Gogeta was probably one of the only decks that X21 players didn't want to see.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, I think it's going to be our first tier 1, maybe the only tier 1. Maybe we're in a tier 0 format.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I also absolutely agree that this is better than the BT 2021. It has a way better matchup spread.
Yeah, I think it's a lot smarter to choose this deck instead. But I do think it does take a bit more thinking.
Oh yeah, like it's really hard combos to learn, and it's sequencing. If you sequence wrong, you just die. So that's why it's not too popular, but I'm okay with that, you know?
Indeed. Next, we're moving on to our son, Android 16. Got a promo leader that everybody forgot existed, but I didn't. And where does it belong?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know. The problem is that I actually think it's weaker than the Battle Evolution 16, because simply it's green, and green doesn't have nearly as good a staples as blue does. So I'm going to put it in casual because I can't really see it appearing that often.
Yeah, see, my issue with this deck is its effect is so good. So it reduces like the first android and scientist to really cheap, and that's such a good effect. But what are you doing apart from that?
Like, you don't really have like an absolute huge amount of options for that. Like they didn't reveal.
Yeah, you have the 21s.
Yeah,
that's kind of it.
Yeah, they didn't really reveal a huge amount of the promo leaders. So didn't get. Did they really get any cards in the reveal in the actual booster box? I don't know.
No, I don't think it got the Z card, but that's it.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be casual, but it could be rogue. People really like 16, so they might do more with them. But
yeah,
there's not much more to speak about in this guy because we're gonna be talking about the new cell, a cell that, like, I thought was gonna be great, and then the more we looked into it, and the more we found out you couldn't use counters, the erratic ginger towel, and it just fell apart. The wheels came off.
I know.
It's
look like. I was a big believer when they first revealed the deck. I was like, I know you can't use extra counter cards, but you can use battle counters. That's okay. And the Z Leader's really good. And then they
Yeah,
errated it, and now it's so bad.
everyone was like Black Mass saying it's gonna be the ultimate hand destruction deck. It's gonna be tier 0, and then it just killed the deck in
I know.
one errata.
Yeah. So
Um,
for anyone that doesn't know, the errata says you can only include green and you can only play green androids. Do you know what that means? That means there's only two counters in the whole game you can play, and they're both not great.
mm, just yeah. So for that reason, bam, first into the trash can.
Oh, it's sad because this deck looked so good, but bye bye.
We hardly knew you.
Yeah.
But actually, one deck that has had a huge success over the other cell's failure is the Ultimate Deck cell. I think this deck's actually now in a very competitive light because Green got great support, and I think the Cell Ultimate deck has actually gotten some really good support from the Trash Cell deck.
Yeah, I agree. I think this deck gets a lot better. There's some cute little stuff you can put in from the new set, and it's a solid hand control deck.
Yeah,
I think the one drawback is that the Unison's a lot weaker now because there's just better Unison removal.
yeah,
But not every you don't have to play the Unison. You can go more extra card and battle card heavy.
yeah, and we haven't really seen it used Z battle cards. We kind of see how it now integrates with the Z decks because we haven't really seen it since the Dawn of Legends came out.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it's got like the new cooler, the new Goku. The
yeah,
new cooler is messed up.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
think this is actually maybe this is controversial, but I think it's right up here. I think Green has more than one competitive leader this meta. I'm
Yeah,
maybe it's
I agree.
maybe it's a hot take, but I think this it's a combination of hand destruction and the sheer amount of aggro it can now put out. I think it's going to be tough, especially having cells Earth Destroying Kamehameha in.
Yeah. Also, this is a leader with built-in spot removal, which is really good now. That's a
Yeah,
lot better than it used to be.
yeah. I think maybe it's cells. Maybe it's a different cells time, not the
Yeah.
one everyone thought they were getting. But I think it's
Yeah.
1.5. I think it's going to be seen a lot more, and because it's an ultimate deck, you can just get it from TCG Player card market still, and have most of the cards already. It was a very strong
Yeah.
deck, and I think Dormant and Frieza Charismatic Villain have had 3 or 4 or 5 reprints now. So the deck is
Yeah, they're really cheap.
the deck is a budget deck, if and also on top of that, the SCR sell max power. I mean,
Uh,
obviously this deck doesn't just search it, but just having another powerful SCR, I think this deck will be have a resurgence, a wild resurgence.
yeah. I agree.
Next is your current main deck, a green Majin Buu. Why don't you take us through this?
Yeah, so I took. I've been on Boo for a while. I took it to the last webcam regional. I went X3, so was just outside of top 32, sadly, due to tie breaks. I think this deck is really strong. I think it has been really strong for a long time, and I think it's so toolboxy. You don't have to play a very big archetype. You can adapt really well because it's you can go aggro, hand control, or control. You can do so much with this leader, and the Z leader is one of the best Z leaders out there. So I am gonna stick with this deck. I think it gets even better next format because its hardest matchups of Sin and Gogeta are gone.
Yeah,
But even in the last format, it still did well into Sin and Gogeta. It was just their tougher matchup. So I definitely think this is a contender. I don't think anyone else is gonna play it,
yeah. I mean,
but I think it's really strong.
yeah, and you're opponent not knowing what the deck does is a huge benefit to you. Is there anything in
Yeah.
Wild Resurgence you feel it's going to go straight into this deck, or is it going to stay largely the same?
It's potentially some of the green stuff. I haven't tested it too much. One of the big things about this deck I do want to mention is the green decks in the next set. This deck does very well against, because you have drop area interruption against Gohan, and Gohan needs its drop area to do its combo, and you can interrupt that really well, and you just spot remove the board constantly. So yeah, good deck, good deck.
So where would you put it? 1.5 Rogue, straight into trash can?
Personally, I think it's a 1.5 deck, but I
Trash
can
it
see
is.
the argument.
I wouldn't say.
I think it's like the most slept on green deck currently.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's tough to say because we haven't really seen anyone playing with it. So, I think for now it's Rogue, but because I just think that we need to see results before we can kind of show. Even though we haven't seen the results for any of these, but whatever.
You'll get them. I'll top the next regional with this. It'll be fine.
Oh, well, not gonna be at the next regional.
Yeah, true. Whoops.
Right, Cooler is a deck that disappointed me from one green deck that you love to a green deck that I wanted to love. And it let me down big time. Even with his promo cards and all the support that came out afterwards, you couldn't put this guy back together again. He's still in the competitive scene. You still see him in the top 16s. It's Unison Cooler, if you can't make it out. It's a deck that I think should be a lot better than it is. And I can't see why it doesn't do well, but you kind of just can't really win with the deck. Well, you can, but you can't really win with events. It has a ceiling to it. And
I think the issue with this deck is the minute you run into a 20k lead, you kind of just stop playing.
yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it needs a Z-Leader, kind of.
Yeah, in the Zenkai block, he took a big hit.
Well,
He's
even
just
before
not
then,
suited to it.
like after Ultimate Squad, I thought this would be up there with U7 Goku. I thought this was going to be the best deck coming out of Ultimate Squad, and it did all right, but it just seems to have stayed in the same place. Obviously, Green hasn't got a huge amount of support since generic support, so although it did get new Cooler cards, so
yeah, true. I still think this deck can do stuff, but it's never gonna be like a dominant deck.
Yeah, I think it's like mid rogue. I think it's just a strong as Soul Striker. I think it's where it belongs.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Next is Raditz reboot. Probably one of the more degenerate hand control strategies in the meta, but it seems to just appear and then get forgotten about again, and then you'll see it get a random top here and there and be forgotten about. So I'm not sure where you put Raditz, to be honest.
I'd say he's a rogue deck. Like, he tops once in a blue moon, everyone goes mad, and then he disappears for a while, and then he does it again, you know?
Yeah,
I just think he's going to continue doing that.
Yeah, I feel like that puts him more down to the casual level. Just because it's so sparse between his tops. But he did he win the event? I think he won actually won the whole event. In
He
Australia did. So
yeah, I think it was the French one. He won the French one, didn't he?
it could have been Oceania, it could have been France.
Yeah, true.
I think they were the same weekend.
Yeah. See, like, that's my opinion for putting him in Rogue. Whenever he does turn up, he does very well, but then he just never turns up again. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's more shouts out that he's casual, and that could have just been a one. I'm gonna say casual, because.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say casual. Although
Okay.
maybe
I
not.
agree. I think he's the hardest one to rank here so far.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a solid argument to say he's Rogue, because, yeah, I suppose we should say Rogue, because it's clearly been proven that he can win an event. I just think he's not of, just think because it's Raditz, people don't want to play him. I think it's more like it gets
Yeah.
overlooked. A deck that doesn't really get overlooked, that's a character that's hard. It's pretty easy to overlook him in size, but he is definitely a really loved character, not by Ned, but by a lot of the community, is SS3 Gotenks. This guy actually did beat Gogeta in an Australian final, I believe it was. So he's strong.
No, it was Latham.
No, it's Latham, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm obsessed with Australia today. SS3 Gogeta or Gotenks is. I'm just going to put straight in Rogue.
Yeah.
It's very strong. There's not much to say about it because it's just a good deck.
It's been basically the same deck
Since
ever since the first leader came out, and now they've just changed the leader and the unison, and that's basically the deck.
You got some
Like-
good cards.
Oh yeah, true. The deck's cool. It'll never. It's just. It's like Soul Striker. It will never go away. It's just that green deck.
You heard it here first, people. I think Gotenks is first. It's real cool. Next we've got a deck I think everyone's really excited about, except some people, is SS2 Gohan. For me, I think this deck's actually a meta deck. I think it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah. I think this is the best generic green deck we've had in ages. I think it's got a few flaws that some people are overlooking, but it's still really strong.
Gohan is flawless, so there you Bamp of the game. He's going right up there, right next to his band leader, best of one band leader. I think
this next deck makes me sad.
I think it goes right there. King Cold, your old buddy. He brought you to many events.
He did. This deck, I love this deck a lot. I think this deck is really good, but I think it is very outdated, and with the amount of unison hate, this deck is really going to struggle.
It's not his time then? Is it joining 816 in casual?
I think like a really good pilot could get rogue with this deck. Could get a top with this deck. Could put it in rogue, but this deck so heavily needs its unison to do well, and it can do stuff without the unison. But at that rate, you're green, so you're really energy hungry. So you want that unison.
Yeah.
And now there's the blue baby coming out that kills the unison.
Yeah.
All of the next green set kills unisons. You've Smoke Dragon in every other color. So yeah, this deck's gonna struggle.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was thinking casual. You made me think this is trash.
No. No way is it sold here.
Yeah, we'll put in casual. There I was thinking we were going to be talking about putting it in a rogue, but you made an argument to say it's not very good at all. Broly swap.
Look, if you moving on from King Cold. I could rant about that deck for a while.
Yeah, it's not the KC podcast, but we are going to talk about Swap Broly, a deck that's actually kind of had a bit of a comeback recently, and I think it did get a promo card in the last tournament, the last regional supports, which is very strong, and we've kind of just been seeing it hanging around in the competitive scene. What would you say about it?
I think this deck's pretty good. It always tops here and there. It does well now and then. It's if you're against a deck that doesn't draw a lot of cards, this is like the worst matchup for that kind of deck, where you're getting aggroed and it's hand controlling you, well, pseudo hand controlling you. So I could see this deck doing a lot better now that Sin and Gogeta are gone. It's just a real aggro deck, but it does have that it's always had the inherent weakness of being really bad into other red decks.
I'm going to put it in Rogue, and my justification for this is that you very much still need to see the right cards at the right time. It's still kind of situational. Like, it does draw a good bit, but if you don't see... It's the thing that affects all swap decks. If you don't really see your card to swap a 2 for your 3 and then into your 4, you kind of just stagnate. and your opponent just gains
Yeah.
advantage on you while you kind of figure out what to do. So even though 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10 your strategy might go off with a hitch, there is that just game that you need to be consistent, and unfortunately this deck can actually ruin you, especially in a best of one tournament, just to get, it's best of one usually to get before top 8, and
Yeah.
you could just be unlucky 2 times. If it's 7 or 8 rounds, you could be unlucky in two of the games and just miss out on top 8 because of that. So I'm gonna put it in row category. I absolutely believe that it can compete with some of the decks up here, but I just think if you're taking it to a tournament, you have to bear in mind that a lot has to go your way. Certain cards can't go into your life, especially your last life. And although it is a very strong deck and it's very scary to see sometimes. Next is a deck that I don't want to see back in the meta. Miku Kabora players definitely hate the fact that this guy could be back. U7 Goku, he's pretty much the beginner's deck. If you're looking to learn the Dragon Ball Super card game, he's pretty much your entry step deck. He has
Wow, throwing shade.
It's not throwing shade. I mean, if you were the very first pick up, it has all the base mechanics. Like it has a unison. It has a dual attacker. It has a double strike. It has a critical. It has it has now a Z battle card.
It does. It got one in the anniversary box for no reason.
Well, I guess they have to support their new players somehow. It's kind of just an idiot-proof deck. Like the deck kind of plays itself. You can get it.
It is the most boring deck ever made.
You just kind of one card. Yeah, if you have the answer in your hand, there's not really too many combos. You can make it a bit more combo heavy depending on your build. There's a bit of openness there, but the engine is quite thick. It's quite big. There's not an awful lot of room for originality in its build. So I think it's still going to be up here in 1.5 because it's just so easy to learn. It does answer a lot of questions. Red just has some really, really good Z cards anyway, just to be heavy aggro. What do you think? Is it 1.5?
I agree. I think it has the potential to be meta, but we just need to see how the meta shapes out because, like you said, it's such a linear deck. It does the same thing every time. It's really not strategy dependent, matchup dependent sometimes. So if the meta turns out favorable, this is a tier 1 deck. But for now, I'd put it in 1.5 to be safe.
Spaceship Goku. It's a deck that kind of got forgotten about, but I actually think this deck can be really, really strong going into next format. Not only because it got a Z-Leader, which people didn't even notice was a thing, but the Pan structure deck, a lot of the cards that say if your leader is Pan, and your leader becomes a Pan when it awakens, and it can awaken pretty fast, almost immediately. I don't see why this deck couldn't be in the conversation, other than the fact that a lot of people just aren't talking about it.
Yeah, I think the moment Smoke Dragon came out, people just dropped this deck.
Yeah, that's true.
I think there was an interesting discussion about this deck going on last format, where you don't run multiple copies of the Unison. You let the Unison get smoked on turn 2, and then turn 3 you just play the baby Unison, the free drop one that's crazy, and then you just use that for the rest of the game. And I think that is a way more viable strategy now that the fast aggro decks are gone. So we could definitely see a resurgence of this deck just doing that, and just being like a slower red deck, because its boss monster is still really strong.
Yeah, and it has gotten support that you wouldn't even realize was support for the deck. The SS4 Goku card that came in the Pan structure deck, I believe you can play that in this deck when you awaken, and that's just, you put 2 cards in your drop here and it's pretty much a dual attacker, so I don't think there's any reason this deck can't compete at the highest level.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lot better next format than it was any of the previous formats.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could see this deck coming back into the meta, just being different to how it used to be.
Next is Android 13, one of my favourite decks. I really enjoy playing this deck because you can play mid range, you can go aggro. It's got some good options. I really enjoy playing this deck. It hasn't really got any better going into the next format, but it has gotten rid of 3 matchups that I didn't particularly like, so that's kind of a bonus. It was hard to play against Gamma because Gamma's a great deck. It just floodgated everyone out of it and really made it hard to play this deck. And then obviously Sin and Gogeta were just better than 13, so obviously it just gets a natural boost by them being gone. So I think Android 13 does remain between Rogue and 1.5, and maybe it's my biasy, but I'm gonna just drop him into 1.5. But I am biased. But I think it has a lot of options, a lot of utilities, so it's hard to say that it's not 1.5. I think everything about the decks, to me, says that's where it belongs. But it could be a rogue option, seeing how Red develops throughout the meta.
Yeah, like I'll defer to your judgment on this because you've played a lot more than I do. But just off of impressions, I think this deck could be a serious contender next format. Its
Yeah.
boss monster is crazy.
It's got a great boss monster. It's got great options because you can swap to the green yellow one and do a bit of hand destruction, so you can kind of customize it as you play. The one weakness is I don't think you draw a huge amount with this deck. You can kind of, and it could be susceptible to some hand ripping decks. Hand rip strategies could be, and if hand rip is going to be prominent in this format, it could fall down the ladder a little. But we will see how the meta develops. I think at the moment 1.5, it could jump up to tier 1, it could jump down to Rogue, depending on how the meta obviously develops. Next is another deck, just like Soul Striker. I think it's even older than Soul Striker here. It definitely is. Cooler Mill. He's been around for a long time, and he will be in Rogue for a long time. Not much to say on Cooler Mill, we all know what it does. It's a mill deck, probably the best mill strategy, or at least the most consistent in what it does. So we'll just put in Rogue. You know,
it is the Rogue deck. This is the Rogue deck that you judge all other Rogue decks by. You know.
Yeah, it's another one of those dictionary definition Rogue decks.
Yeah. I think it's also better than Janemba Mill currently. I think Janemba Mill's in a good spot, but Cooler Mill's just better.
Yeah, I think it's Cooler Mill. Next, it's the structure deck of Pan. I think this is also just the sheer amount of power that Pan puts out early on. The pressure is just crazy, and it draws so much. It really got slept on with Gogeta being out. But Pan is, for me, there's no conversation. I think it goes into 1.5. I just think people don't want to play it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I can even see the conversation for this being the tier 1 red deck from the next format.
Yeah, I think the player pickup probably won't be a huge amount because I just don't think people want to play a Pan deck. But the core of the deck is so small, you have so much versatility with it. It's fantastic in so many ways. And if you want to put pressure on your opponent from the offset, like, it's so powerful.
Yeah, deck's really good. I'd say 1.5 for now, could definitely be 1.
Yeah, I think 1 is probably a little, I mean, maybe Gohan doesn't belong on 1, but I think it could. But Broly Surge, that's another older deck, but we've started seeing some positive signs for the deck.
Yeah, it topped that one regional recently with a really cool list. And it's probably the best deck at abusing the Gogeta super combo, which, for anyone that doesn't know, the newest Gogeta super combo only cares about your Z energy, so when you combo with it, you draw, it doesn't matter what life you're at. And there's a red Vegeta whose activate main is discard him, add a Gogeta BR from drop to hand. So you essentially have 8 super combos in this deck.
Yeah, that's super powerful. Part of me wants to say it's casual just because I don't know.
It's literally like 1 top.
Yeah, I'm gonna say casual because that seems very I think a lot of the advantage it had is because people just didn't know, and when you see Broly Surge appear, you think, oh, it's just some dude who's here for fun, and then suddenly you're playing the wrong way, and you end up falling into all of its traps. So,
Yeah.
not to say the pilot isn't great, but he probably is a fantastic player. And it was a monumental task to do an achievement with such an old deck, but obviously you're always helped out by the fact that a lot of new players would have no idea what this deck does and how it plays. But I'm going to put in casual just because I think if all the players knew about what it did and how to play against it and its level of strength, I think it wouldn't do just as well as it did in that event. Next, we're moving on. If I get clipped up for anything, if anyone says, if this backfires on
I
me...
can see a world where this is wrong. One sec.
So, if I'm going to get clipped up for anything, this might be the most controversial take, but I think Schlanku is a bad deck. Everybody keeps saying that this guy is competitive and not to sleep on him. But I'm sorry, Hishlong is not getting near me. I'm not freaking touching this dude. He is a bad deck. He offers only critical, and he already has a deck. Like, if you play SS2 Trunks, or if this deck became any bit relevant, you just play SS2 Trunks and you're in for a good time.
Yeah, I agree. I think this deck is so overhyped. The more I've looked at it, the more I'm like, this deck there is an answer in every color that outs this deck.
Yeah, it's so convoluted. You need so many things to go your way. Any kind of like removal of the power pulls, or whatever. If you put a card, the power pull underneath it, and that got dudes removed, everything starts falling apart on you pretty quickly. If you're going against a deck that has a lot of counters in it.
Yeah, I don't think this deck is going to do well at all. I'm
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys.
I think at best it's casual.
Yeah, at best. It's not sold here. It's better.
But I'm going to be putting it in trash. I think it's just terrible. But this will be me, and then I'll end up winning worlds or something, and people will laugh at me. But that's me. I'm brave, and I'm standing up for what I believe in. And I believe Schlanku belongs in the trash can with his power pro.
Right. Oh, but this next deck
is a deck that it's so old. It's just unbelievable. But I don't know where to put this at all. Because sometimes it's up here and sometimes it's down here.
Yeah. This is the most like variance deck I've ever seen, because sometimes I've played against it and been like, wow, that was like the most easiest match I've ever had, and then sometimes it's dropping like 35k triple strikers on turn 2 and you're dead.
Yeah.
Or turn 3. So I don't know, I'd say Rogue for now. The Z-Leader's nuts, but the rest of the deck is like fine.
Set 1 Frieza. The oldest leader on this list by a mile. Proves just how powerful Yellow is. That a set 1 leader is still worth talking about.
Yeah, look, do we need to cover this dude for long? He's 1.5.
1.5. That's...
Yeah.
And now we're going on to Structure Deck Goku. The Ape Goku rests everything. It's really strong. It's a hard to beat deck, but I don't think it's the hardest to beat. So I think it goes into Rogue.
Yeah, it always does well. Its engine is just too big to be like yellow good stuff. That's its issue.
Yeah, and I just think there's way better yellow decks in the conversation, like Spirit Bomb, which everybody is now suddenly high on. Which I think when we first saw this deck get announced, I thought this was actually a really good deck. And then everyone was like, nah, forget about it. But I think this might be up there. Maybe it's a risk. But I think that's a tier 1 deck. I really do.
Yeah, I can see it too. This deck just has so many options to it. Especially now that the early aggro is gone. But this deck's so good. It draws so many cards. It yellow good stuff so well. And then it just kills you with its like 80k double strike leader that you didn't know was coming. It's really cool.
Yeah, I just think that this deck is going to be really powerful, and also I just think any leader that says Yellow Saiyan has so many options, so many ways to build your deck out.
Oh
It's you have so much options. It's hard to think of what do I cut out. It's more of your problem than how do you build a deck. How do you narrow down
yeah,
your
I agree.
options? Majin Vegeta, I think, is the best deck still of the format. Because it just offers you everything you could want. You're a heavy aggro player. You can play heavy aggro. You want to play mid range. Fantastic for doing that. You want to play control. You want to hold out your opponent. Keep them at arm's length. They've got you covered. You've got Vegeta. You've got robotic repost. Like this deck can do whatever you want it to do.
Yeah, and especially with the new Sin promo,
Yeah,
making it so that this deck can't die to the Vegeta SCR is just nuts.
yeah. It's absolutely, without a doubt, maybe the best deck of the format in my opinion. I don't see what really caused it too much issue, but
Yeah,
you never know. Um,
yeah.
Now we've got Flipku, a deck that at first seemed like it was going to be like game changing, but the more you looked into it, you were like, I don't see it. Casual in
Okay,
my opinion.
I have an interesting take on this deck.
Oh,
So when I first saw it, I agreed with you. I thought like, nah, this deck's trash. Like, it's all of its stuff is so shit. But then when I was thinking about it recently, you don't actually need to play any of the engine in the deck because
yeah,
the leader just inherently draws on every turn, yours and your opponent's. So this can just be yellow good stuff dot deck and says once per turn draw a card.
hmm,
So as a yellow good stuff dot deck, I think this has way more potential than its actual archetype.
that is true. So it could be a bit like Kid Gohan.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. I could see it being rogue, maybe even yeah, I could see
Yeah,
it being rogue, just as yellow good stuff dot deck.
yeah, we'll put in Rogue. It might go up to 1.5,
Yeah, it has
but
potential to be higher.
I mean, it might get support on future sets anyway. Here is your
Yeah.
boy. It's maybe Player Seven's favorite deck,
Oh,
or at least his most successful deck. Took him to London Glory.
yeah.
I think it was third place in London with Yellow Baby.
It
Uh,
was, yes.
it has had support recently, so where does a stack against the best?
Uh, so I took it to an event last format and did decently well with it. Its biggest issue was the red decks, because this deck absolutely loves to take advantage of the mid-range to control format, which is what we're looking at next format. We're not looking at a very fast format, and this deck does that really well. This deck can kill you when you're on one energy. It can kill you on turn two very consistently, and doing that next format looks really well. Um, I think the deck is much harder to play than people think because it's a sequence heavy combo deck. I really look forward to testing it next format, but I think it's one of those things where I've just played the deck so much where I think I could do very well with it, but I don't think it'll ever like rise in popularity.
Yeah, I think it screams Rogue because it's just the way it has the same strengths and weaknesses as the rest of the Rogue decks. Like they're in Soul Strike. If you know your stuff about the deck, you can do well. But if
Yeah,
you get bad matchups, it can really set you back.
yeah.
But
Like
obviously,
the height of the combo is getting 16 attacks out on turn two,
mm,
and yeah,
just that wins every time. If you
yeah,
can get 16 attacks out.
yeah.
Um, Now it's time to talk about, and the final, last but not least, Trunks Cheetah, a deck that I feel like has completely fallen out of the conversation for competition just through power creep. I don't think it does nearly uh, as much as it used to do. I feel like, I mean, Poutine is not nearly the card it once was. Resting cards really isn't as scary as it once was. And there's a lot of free play going on at the moment that you can trigger both the Trunks and the Poutine, so it's not really that big a deal anymore.
Yeah, it's. I still think this is like just on paper a good deck, but why would you ever play this deck over Majin Vegeta, Spirit Bomb, or or sorry, not Mecha Frieza, Golden Frieza? Like,
Yeah.
why would you play it over those?
Yeah, you've got a lot of options, and I still think the structure deck, Goku is still even a bit stronger because at least it forces all the battle cards to rest mode rather than your opponent having to play into it. So I think
Yeah.
I still think it's in the rogue category.
Oh yeah, like this is still a good deck.
You can
It's
still top
just
with it.
not as good as the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just kind of isn't as scary as it once was. But I do think if it sticks around, there will be metas that it suddenly hops up here, and there'll be metas where it drops down here, and then where'd you go from there? But that is it for the tier list. I think there's a lot of options. Like you can see here in Rogue, you've got so many different things if you want to play outside the meta thing. But between 1 and 1.5, like, it's kind of funny we've only put 4 leaders up into 1, but I do feel like we'll see a lot of these guys winning events. So I don't think
like,
this
I'll
is...
be honest, guys. I think the gap between 1 and 1.5 is really small.
Yeah, it's only just a small amount. And to be honest, some of it's just
Yeah.
based on... I'm not 100% sure, but I do feel like Blue Baby, it wouldn't surprise me if this is up here and we're just talking about how it just wins and wins and wins and wins. But it also wouldn't surprise me if this was up here or if this was down here in Rogue.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, and that's the exciting thing is in 2 weeks from now we will see what's going to happen, and I'm excited for a new format because Gogeta, Sin, and Gamma were just killing the game for me.
Yeah. And this next format looks awesome.
Yeah, I think we're going to finally see the gap between Rogue and Tier 1 has finally been kind of closer together rather than before where you could just play Gogeta and win and win and win and without really putting in too much work, and the deck kind of wins for you. And it was just really boring seeing every single meta listing was just like every single tournament results were just four Gogeta players, 3 Shinron players, 1 Majin Vegeta player. The top 8 breakdowns were so dull to talk about. I just stopped doing any conversations about the events because it was the same conversation every time. But do you have any closing remarks?
Green Buu Tier 0 incoming. Wait for the next online region.
Oh dear God, he's lost his mind. I'm gonna have to end the video there before he starts saying some crazy stuff. If you liked the video, share, subscribe, comment down below. Tell us we're completely wrong. Tell us we're completely right, or whatever leaders we completely forgot. I probably forgot about loads of them, to be honest. Whatever happens, have an awesome day and goodbye.